Hello everyone, this is Dr. Cindy Woody back with your step 3 for your PASL Write It Up video series, Write It Up Fast. So today for baby step 3A, we're going to work on a few things here. Cleaning up our focus in our written commentary. So you must stick to one problem. You may have done many things in your internship. I hear from a lot of candidates who have solved lots and lots of problems, but they don't necessarily lend themselves to the written commentary. For example, we'll see people who have worked on attendance issues or classroom management challenges, but those don't fit with the written commentary. And I'm going to clean my written commentary up for you to show you how I'm dropping back from more than one problem to a simpler, cleaner problem focus. We also are going to look at my data sets. My data in my written commentary was kind of confusing. There was too much and it wasn't really clearly focused. And so we're going to figure out how to clean that up. I want to talk to you briefly about avoiding formulaic writing. So in the last video, I talked about that you could use mine or the PASL library of PASL library of exemplars as a template for your writing, and you can. But what you can't do is go word for word exactly like somebody else's example. There is software built in to the test, and it clearly mentions that, discusses it in detail in the candidate handbook that will catch it if you have copied somebody else's work. So if yours is too similar to somebody else's, you will be flagged for cheating and your scores will be kicked out and you will have wasted all your time and money and you'll be set back another semester. So you don't want to do that. So make it your own. Do not use Chat GPT. Write from your heart. You'll notice my writing is not very formal. It also has um, just some colloquial or local phrases in it, like it might be or maybe so, those kinds of things in there. And that's okay. What you don't want to do is make it sound like some computer or somebody else wrote your test. And then the last thing is treat it like a test. I cannot actually review and give you feedback directly on your exam, especially if you're my student. What I can do is I can provide information to everybody. So that's why when people ask me questions, I like to make a video about it so I can share information with everyone when people are confused. So we can answer questions, we just can't score your work. This is a test. So let's move to baby step 3B. I'm going to switch over for a second and I'm going to move back to my written commentary and I'm going to show you what I've changed. Let me see if I can narrow this down a little bit so you have less to look at. Maybe not. Okay, so I took out all the color coding and I have done red, track changes, strike throughs, so you can see where I've reduced my problem. So the problem I selected was providing, and I changed inclusion supports to Tier 1 math instructional strategies for students who receive their special education services, and I took out all the references to ELAR. So I'm just going to focus on math. That'll make it much cleaner and easier for a number of reasons. It'll make it easier to talk about reporting the data. It'll make it easier to talk about the strategies that you use to work with this group and then how this impact can have, what kind of impact this can have on your whole school system. So I've done that here. I've kind of marked out a lot on the data. We'll talk a little bit more about the data in a minute. And I've done that here. So don't panic. You can pause this video and look at this, but I'm going to come back to this in a minute to show you how I've redone the data again. So let's go back here to our presentation. So let's also look at on baby step 3B, how will you attach this into this little box? So you're going to have a one-page representative page, a representative page of longitudinal data, maximum of one page, and you're going to attach it in this box. Well, that part is clearly done in your PASL submission. You can see where to click. There's a link that you click on. But if you don't drop it in this box, it's not going to count. So let's look at the sample data page that I made. So here's mine. So in my commentary, I talked about star data and benchmark data. I could have done IXL progress reports. I could have done iReady progress reports. Study Island, there are a lot of electronic sources that I could have used that are easy to pull. I could have done the data wall in our school. If we have a data war room, I could have taken pictures of the data wall. And so I've just given you some examples. One way that you can show the data is you can create your own chart. So I created a summary chart. At this time, I did not go into PEMS and actually pull, not PEMS, the taper report. I did not pull a real school's data set. You know, I did that in your campus description, but I did not pull real data. I just made up data here and I tried to show that the gap was increasing. That was something I wanted to show here. So I've just done the averages for each year, and I've come up with the average of the past 3 years. I've done the campus data versus the SPED data, and I color-coded it to make it quickly understandable to the reader. Now, I understand if you're a stats person, this is a little bit fuzzy math because I've averaged averages. You can't really do that. And I talked about point gaps where we're really talking about percentage points, but this is enough. My point in telling you this is you don't have to go crazy trying to do, master's level data analysis for this chart. This is a one-page sample. This could be one page from one big report that you pulled from the computer. But since you need more than one data source to prove longitudinal issues, I've made more reports on here. Now, I do not have access to DMAC. I Googled and I got this in Google Images, and I just showed DMAC reports provide additional views. This one just happened to be a student achievement report. There are a lot of other and better reports in DMAC and in Eduphoria that you could pull. But again, I don't have access to those. And then I wanted to show you what it looks like to redact student names. All I did was I'm in a Word document. I added a shape. I covered up this block of student names. And I'm showing that unit test scores are available for most students since 4th grade. So you can see how this shows, this again, taken from Google Images. This shows that I was able to access all of their data going back since 4th grade. And so I have these kinds of things. Then it's got a special ed indicator, yes or no. So I thought this one was really nice. If you could pull a report like this in real life, this could be very helpful to you as you move into your data phase. So this is my one pager, and I'm going to title it to match what this says, a representative page of longitudinal data. That's exactly what I'm going to call it. I'm going to drop it into here, and I'm going to move on. So let's go back now. I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to adjust my written commentary to make my written commentary cleaner, and I'm going to remove all of the track changes so you can see ultimately the progress that I've made at baby step 3B. Okay, so I've made my changes. I removed the track changes and all the coloring. As I move through this video, you're welcome to pause and look at what I've written. Remember, use this as an exemplar, but not as a drop your words in the spot where my words go kind of thing. And let me also check word count for you. Let's see if I can get that up here. So characters with spaces, 4,228. So we're still doing fine on word count. So let's take a look at what we've got here. Now I've changed the problem. I've added the word differentiated. And we did use the spinning wheel and differentiation strategies was on there. But when you really start to look at what the issue is, we're talking about instructional strategies because we're trying to improve instruction. And we're talking about the students who are in a mainstream classroom setting. I've clarified, I've added some descriptive writing. So in the PASL handbook, there's a good discussion of analysis, analytical writing, and descriptive writing. If you don't have analytical writing and descriptive writing, you won't be successful on PASL. So I've said this represents 90% of our special ed students, and I changed that to say 90%, which is 60 students out of our total special ed population, which is 67 students. So you can see that this is important because 90% of our students are in these inclusion settings. So this is going to make a difference. I'm going to let you pause and read this for yourself if you wish to. I'm just going to show you some of the major changes that I made. I took out a sentence that, remember when we talked yesterday, it didn't have any highlighting. I left this part right here, but I cleaned up some of the language that went with it to shorten it just a bit so that we could focus on what was going on here. So we believe that everybody can learn at a high level, and that's why we're using the inclusion model. But our survey revealed that 7 out of 10 of our teachers in math felt underprepared. So when I said 70% of the teachers, what did that really mean? Now I've cleared up that 70% is 7 out of 10 of our general education math teachers felt underprepared to work with students who had IEPs. Walkthroughs revealed that in the majority of math classrooms, teachers implemented IEPs but only at a surface level, And then I clarified what I meant by note-taking assistance so the grader didn't have to guess. So if one student's IEP called for note-taking assistance, teachers commonly handed out all SPED students a copy of lesson notes at the beginning of every lesson, rather than teaching the student note-taking skills and how to use notes. When we collected the sample, 19 of 60 SPED students got the math questions right. So you don't have to worry about using basic abbreviations that any educator would know, like SPED and IEPs. You could say the CNA, but I think in this situation, campus needs assessment should be spelled out. But I think this is a fairly good example for you. It's not super fancy. See, I use the word got the math questions right. Like there's just kind of regular talk from a regular person. Okay, now I've drastically changed the data section. So now that I have our good, clean page of data, it's easier for me to see how I want to use them. Looks like a little space here. How I want to use them to describe the problem. So star test data, I just jumped right into it. Star test data. So what longitudinal data did you collect? Why are they appropriate? And how did it support your problem? Star test data for the past 3 years revealed that even though campus math scores had steadily improved each year, the SPED performance gap was widening as students moved from 6th to 8th grade. That's a really big deal. Performance gaps are a big deal. I always say more than 10 points is considered to be an achievement or performance gap. These data are appropriate because the STAR test is aligned with the rigor expectations of the TEKS. So there's my why. And then the 3-year STAR average, these are my specific, this is my descriptive part, showed 39-point gap at 6th grade, a 42-point gap at 7th grade, and a 44-point gap at 8th grade. So isn't that much clearer than what we had to start with in video 2? Our math teachers give a common assessment every 2 to 3 weeks, which is an appropriate data tool. So there's my why. For the past 2 years, unit assessment data showed that the gap between SPED and non-SPED students increased as the year progressed. Now, at this point, if I list the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade data for all the unit assessments, it's going to be too much. It's going to overwhelm this paragraph. So I've given an example. For example, last year's 7th grade math students scored 15 points lower than their peers on the first math unit assessment and 45 points lower than their peers by the end of the year. So you see how that's clearer? Also notice that I normally would put a comma. Where did last year go? For example, last year, comma, 7th grade math students. Do not worry about little things like that. This is where you can save a character space if you need it. So if you're a person who writes too many words, you can take out your descriptor words, like your adverbs like very or entire, and then you can remove some of these smaller commas. You could even take the comma out here. For example, last year, 7th grade. It's going to read fine. They're going to get the point. The data supported the concerns that math teachers were underprepared to use differentiated instructional strategies for working with SPED. So there's the teaching part. So this is where I'm going to work on. And then the data confirmed that our current instructional approach was not closing the learning gaps. It was actually making them worse over time. So that's the learning part. And then I didn't do a tremendous amount here, just a little bit of cleanup. You can read this on your own. So let's go back here. Sorry about this. Okay, I got my data all in there. It's all dropped in the right part. I have linked it in the text box. That's just a picture from the handbook for you. I just want to remind you, you've got this. Panic gets you nowhere. Just stay calm. You can do this one little baby step at a time. And yes, you still have time. You can get this done. So go do it. Get busy. I'll see you in video 4 pretty soon.